Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. This testimony can be referenced in RC 54. My name is Maya DeSalvo. I am a long-range planner for the Mat-Su Borough, and I staff the borough's Fish and Wildlife Commission. The commission is a 9-member board advising borough officials, state and federal agencies, and other organizations on interests that may affect the conservation and allocation of fish, wildlife, and habitat across an area the size of West Virginia. The region includes commercial, personal use dip net, sport fish, and subsistence users. The commission produced the It Takes Fish to Make Fish booklet that can be referenced in PC 138 to inform board members on the issues and concerns of residents regarding fisheries in the Northern District. We've organized subsequent testimonies, and we'll be referencing the booklet and key topics in there throughout our testimonies. We've also submitted comments on proposals in RCs 25 and 26. Andy Couch, chairman of the Fish and Wildlife Commission, will address the conservation corridor. Mr. Couch has been a professional salmon guide for 40 years, has served on the Matanuska Valley AC for 30 years, and has years of experience in the Board of Fish regulatory arena. Andy has also written a fishing column for the Frontiersman newspaper for 14 years. Larry Engel will address the history and efficacy of the conservation corridor. Mr. Engel is a former fishery biologist with an ADF&G career spanning 30 years in Cook Inlet, beginning in 1960. He's a former Board of Fish member, serving from 1994 to 2003. Pete Probasco will address the complexity of mixed stock fisheries in Upper Cook Inlet. Mr. Probasco served with Fish and Game for 23 years and retired as the Commercial Fish Division Regional Supervisor in Kodiak. He also spent 17 years with the Federal Subsistence Program, Migratory Birds, and state programs. Howard Delo will address Northern District stocks of concern. Mr. Delo is a former Fish and Game biologist, having served the department and the people of the state of Alaska for 21 years, spending 15 years in the state hatchery program and 6 years in sport fish boating access. He also served on the Board of Fish from 2007 to 2010 and has spent 22 years writing an outdoor in Alaska newspaper column. Kendra Zamzow will address federal fishery management in the EEZ. Ms. Zamzow has a PhD in environmental sciences. She formerly held a Copper River drift gillnet permit and has extensive scientific research experience, most recently as the environmental program manager with Chickaloon Native Village. Gabe Kidder will provide comments on the habitat conditions as they relate to fisheries in the Mat-Su and Northern District. Mr. Kidder is a lifelong Mat-Su resident and local hunting guide. Jim Sykes will inform board members on the extensive habitat protection and restoration work that the Mat-Su Borough has accomplished. Mr. Sykes served on the Borough Assembly from 2013 to 2019. And Mac Menard will close our presentation by highlighting the challenges ahead of us at this meeting. Mr. Menard has served with Fish and Game for 22 years, and during that time, led the commercial fish research efforts in western Bristol Bay, served as the Bristol Bay area sport fish biologist, and retired as the AYK regional supervisor. Mr. Menard has extensive experience in complex fisheries management issues and the regulatory process.
You timed it well. Any questions from any board members? Thank you. The next person up is Andy Couch. That's the general list. You need the one that's on the board.
So, good morning, Chairman Wood and members of the Board of Fisheries. I'm Andy Couch. I would refer you to PC 138. There's a photo on the front, and on page 7 that shows the conservation corridor and the harvest zones I'll be referring to. I would also, this testimony I'm giving will be RC 65. You do not have it yet, but if you want to refer to it in the future, it'll be there. RC 25 and 26 are comments on proposals by the Fish and Wildlife Commission. And then as far as this testimony, proposals 122 and 123 could be possibly used to make these changes that I'm talking about. So I'm talking about our goal number 2 in this booklet. It's on page 4, and that's to maintain and enhance the conservation corridor and the drift gillnet fishery management plan. A strong conservation corridor protects unmonitored, less abundant, and northern district salmon stocks and upper Cook Inlet fisheries. Historically, the larger the preseason projection of Kenai sockeye by the department, the fewer Susitna, coho, and sockeye successfully make it north to their natal streams to spawn. This was a result of indiscriminate mixed stock drift gillnet harvest. It is impossible to harvest one stock at a time in a mixed stock fishery like Upper Cook Inlet. However, confining fishing closer to shore in terminal areas is defined by the expanded Kenai and expanded Kasilof harvest zones is an effective means to pass northern-bound salmon, which run primarily up the middle of the Central District. Terminal fishing areas, called harvest zones, allow fish migrating to northern streams to pass through a conservation corridor. The concept builds off of the highly successful terminal stock management fisheries program in Bristol Bay, enables commercial fishermen to harvest Kenai and Kasilof sockeye closer to shore while protecting less abundant northern-bound salmon stocks. This system works. Terminal stock harvest strategy accounts for the funnel-shaped geography of Upper Cook Inlet and the gauntlet-style commercial mixed stock fishery, ensuring the inlet's less productive salmon stocks, including northern-bound coho and sockeye, pass through the Central District to reach their spawning grounds in Northern District drainages. The uncertainty caused by federal management in the EEZ necessitates more conservative posture be adopted by the board within the remaining state-managed waters. The greatest success in conserving northern-bound salmon stocks has been establishing and maintaining this conservation corridor. Based on these facts, the Fish and Wildlife Commission recommends the board, number one, affirm a commitment to terminal stock fishery management by limiting all drift gillnet fishing in state waters to the expanded harvest zone. This is a proven method to allow for stock-specific harvests while protecting less productive salmon stocks. Number two, reject any expansion of the drift gillnet fishery in state-managed waters. Number three, consider and adopt a super-exclusive management system for drift gillnet fishing in waters managed by the state of Alaska. Thank you.
Any questions from board members? I just have a couple, Andy. I'm looking at the list of witnesses, and obviously almost the full commission's here in one format or another from the Mat-Su, which is very much appreciated, but I don't see any of them addressing the 1% issue. Is there someone going to address that, or would you choose to do so now? How it may be impacted by EEZ? I'll just hope somebody after you does.
So yeah, I'll just briefly at least touch on it. If you look at those proposals I mentioned, those proposals, I think 123 does something with that. So that would eliminate the 1% rule from management plans and manage on abundance. So when you look at the drift fishery management plan, the abundance that that plan seeks to manage for is abundance of northern-bound stocks. We're passing northern-bound stocks. We're trying to achieve the escapement goals. In addition, in that plan, we're talking about providing abundance for northern users to have some harvest opportunity. So if you were to look at that 1% rule and think about eliminating it, as long as you manage based on the abundance of those northern district stocks that plan is based on, I think it could work. But the one problem for that, for the people advocating for more fishing, is that it takes a while for those fish to be measured in our weirs and for us to know that there's an abundance of those fish.
Okay. The second question I have to deal with is just the impact of the EEZ, and I see somebody's going to address that further on down the line, with sense out. But nonetheless, I've seen graphs of the EEZ overlaid on our presently configured districts, and it seems to barely nick one part of the districts. Other districts it comes into a little bit closer. If indeed it's at the front end of the corridor, which the EEZ is, what impact on the numbers of fish do you feel that'll have if it's goes forward like it presently is.
Yeah, so certainly what part of the equation will be what the total allowable catch is and maybe what the total allowable catch is on sockeye. But looking at what happened this year with management and specifically what happened with coho salmon, under the current plan, the drift fishery can fish twice a week in August in that area 1, which is kind of down in that EEZ area. And we had a shortage of sockeye throughout all Upper Cook Inlet. I don't think anybody had a really good year, but up in the northern end, as far as the escapement goals, we had disastrous years for what got through the Little Susitna Weir and the Deshka Weir, and those weirs were flooded late in the year, but most of the season, they counted most of the fish. And so what happened, fishing twice a week in August there, is that was where 50,000 coho were taken.
And maybe a commission could ponder it during, the time we have before we go into committee of the whole. What I'm trying to gauge in my mind is the number of fish we can reasonably anticipate will be harvested under a super exclusive situation by those that are going to be fishing the EEZ versus those that would be fishing the state waters. That's what I'm trying to get my hands around.
Yeah, and I, the state has never measured those harvests in those areas specific to that, so I cannot give you a good answer on that. Thank you.
Any other board questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next person up is Larry Engel.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Larry Engel, and as Maya indicated, I'm a member of the Matanuska-Susitna Fish and Wildlife Commission. My discussion here is found in RC 56, which you'll be getting, and I'll be referring to, again, to RC 138, pages 6 and 7, some of the material I'll provide information about. It's my intent to provide you with a brief review concerning the creation and development of the conservation core concept that's found in the drift management plan. The management of the very abundant and productive Kenai sockeye has historically occurred with little regard for achieving appropriate harvest levels for other salmon populations. This practice has in turn resulted in poor escapements and reduced in-river fishing opportunities throughout northern Cook Inlet. In 2008, Susitna sockeye were designated a stock of concern. This is the third largest sockeye population in all of Upper Cook Inlet. The influence of Kenai sockeye management on this decline was very evident. At that time, Susitna sockeye were being managed for an OEG that was 15,000 fish fewer than the stock's SEG. In other words, in order to maximize Kenai harvest, it was okay to accept lower escapements and abundance to northern bound fish, and that was occurring commonly in those years. Coho returns to northern Cook Inlet reached record lows in 2011-2012 period. Attaining escapement goals for bedrock of fishery management had become a chronic failure for both coho and sockeye, while at the same time, or oftentimes, the Kenai fishery was receiving emergency orders to catch additional Kenai sockeye. In 2011, the board modified the Central District Drift Management Plan to include the conservation corridor and terminal harvest zones concept. Benefits from these changes were realized almost immediately, and by 2020, the stock of concern for Susitna had been removed. The conservation corridor concept has been modified and revised almost every Cook Inlet Board of Fish meeting since its inception. The conservation corridor allows salmon to migrate north. You're going to hear that a lot, but let me give you a few figures. From 2011 to 2019, for example, the drifters harvested 53 coho per delivery from the mixed stock, what we call corridor waters, while at the same time fishing inshore to the terminal harvest zones, they harvested 10 coho per delivery. This is during the last 2 weeks, the peak of the coho run. The drift fleet has proven it can effectively harvest within the terminal harvest zones.
Larry, you're going to have to conclude.
The drift harvest within those terminal areas has been about 400,000 annually, which is a third of the total season's harvest for the drift fishery, and as high as a million. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We encourage you to continue the drift fishery and improve upon this.
Thank you. We'll see if there's any questions. Any questions from board members? I have one. I served on the commission for some number of years. I don't remember how many. My recollection is you were on the Board of Fisheries when that corridor was initially put in place. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay. Did you
I was on the Board of Fish in 2004. That's when I left it. The principal concept of the corridor came about in 2011.
Were you involved in advocating for it? Well, obviously for it, not. Did you play a role in seeing that corridor implemented?
Yes, I did.
Have you changed your opinion at all?
No, over the years, it's been a stronger advocate of the corridor concept. And basically, the corridor concept is stock-specific harvest. You fish inshore closer to where you know where fish are catching. It's a big improvement over fishing where the stocks are all mixed together. When you have a dominant stock, I don't care what mixed stock fishery you have anywhere in Alaska or anywhere in the world as far as salmon goes, when you have a dominant stock and you're trying to achieve maximum sustained yield from that dominant stock in a mixed stock area, it's going to come at a cost to the less numerous, less abundant, less productive stocks. And that's exactly the issue we've been facing here in Cook Inlet through the years, and we're moving away from that to more inshore, as you heard, like Bristol Bay does it.
Would it be fair to say that the top priority for the Mat-Su area was to maintain the corridor system in place?
Maintain it and continue to improve it as we get more information.
Thank you. Any other board questions? Thank you, sir. Next person up is Peter Probasco.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members, staff. I will be focusing on PC 138, pages 9 through 13, and my written comments, or not comments, my written testimony is RC 49. I'm going to speak to the board about mixed stock fishery complexity, and I'm sure many of you already realize that. But as it pertains to Upper Cook Inlet, every July and August, 5 different species of salmon comprised of numerous stocks swim through Upper Cook Inlet around the same time. Some of the major stocks which management plans focus on include the Kenai and Kasilof sockeye, Kenai kings, northern Cook Inlet coho, and sockeye, all migrating in the same area with a commercial fishery primarily targeting Kenai and Kasilof sockeye. You can easily say when compared to other mixed stock fisheries within Alaska, and I've managed some of those, this area represents one of the more difficult and divisive fisheries to manage. Balancing salmon sustainability and allocation with the need to move smaller and less productive stocks through an area where intense fishing occurs, targeting much larger and more productive returns to Kasilof and Kenai, is the major challenge. Further up Cook Inlet are the northern set gill netters. Still further north are subsistence, personal use, and finally the in-river sport fishery. Historically, the larger the preseason projections, particularly for Kenai sockeye by the state, the fewer Susitna coho and sockeye successfully made it north to their natal streams to spawn. Large runs tend to trigger more liberal commercial fishing in the mixed stock fishery of the conservation corridor. In managing this type of a mixed stock fishery, northern bound salmon stocks, especially sockeye, cannot sustain the same harvest rate as a strong, more productive Kenai and conceal life sockeye. Northern District sockeye average approximately 1 point fish return per spawner and are less than the Kenai River, which averages approximately 4 point fish per spawner, and therefore need greater protection. By further refining mixed stock fishery locations and identifying and fishing individual systems, terminal stock management practices may be fine-tuned to help focus the harvest on the larger and more productive stocks. Fishing the drift fleet primarily in the more terminal areas, even on years of high sockeye projections, provide a more conservative management effort which will help support healthy, sustained populations of salmon in the Northern District and Upper Cook Inlet. Given the variability of runtime year to year and the uncertainty of what will happen in EEZ waters, a conservation management approach and the use of terminal stock management and the conservation corridor concepts are necessary to manage this complex fishery and maximize positive outcomes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? Thank you, Pete. Next person up is Howard Dilo. I see you taking up the Bruce Knowles tradition.
Yeah. Well, we all get older eventually. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Howard Dilo, and I'm a member of the Mat-Su-Borough Fish and Wildlife Commission. My comments can be found in RC 47. I'd like to thank you for your service in the management of Alaskan fisheries. Stocks of concern are fish chronically struggling to maintain population stability despite conservative management efforts. The Susitna River sockeye was designated as a stock of yield concern in 2008. With the establishment of the conservation corridor in 2011 and subsequent regulations reinforcing the corridor in 2014, the Susitna River sockeye population improved enough to be delisted as a stock of concern in 2020. Despite the improvement for Susitna sockeye, numerous king salmon populations throughout Upper Cook Inlet, because of their early run timing and is unrelated to the conservation corridor, continue to be listed as a stock of management concern, and many have been there for more than a decade. The results are a continuously declining stock, limited catch and release fishing, and full season closures for anglers. This begs the question, is careful conservation management doing enough? Is there more to be done? The graph on page 20 of this booklet, the Mat-Su booklet, It Takes Fish to Make Fish 2014, that's PC 138, shows the results of significant and continuing declines in king salmon returns to the Northern District, resulting in limited harvest opportunities for anglers. 2023 was the fourth season since 2018 with no king salmon sport harvest in the Susitna. Drainage-wide Susitna king salmon harvest declines in the fourth largest king salmon producer in Alaska indicate a larger concern. Susitna sockeye was a stock of yield concern from 2008 to 2020 and never reached the harvest levels as low as what the kings currently have. The Mat-Su-Borough Fish and Wildlife Commission respectfully requests listing all Susitna drainage king salmon stocks as stocks of yield concern, which would require adjustments to management plans. Thank you. And I would like to call your attention, in this booklet, there's a list of the current stocks of concern up in the valley There's a graph I referenced, and there's the definitions of the various levels of stock of concern on the side of the page for your reference.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Delo. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, sir.
Next up is Kendra Zamzow.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the board. My name is Kendra Zamzow. I'm also a member of the Matanuska-Susitna Fish and Wildlife Commission. And I will also be referring to PC 138, and my testimony is on RC 55. Federal management, to Chair Wood's question, federal management has the potential to devastate the Northern District salmon stocks. Conservative management will likely not be implemented by federal managers and therefore must be implemented by the state. This is particularly critical for the first year of federal salmon management. The National Marine Fisheries Service will set time and harvest limits pre-season with virtually no tools for in-season management to adjust for actual runs. The current NMFS proposal is for 2 12-hour drift gill net fishing periods from June 15th to August 15th, and this doubles the drift fishing time in the EEZ for late July when the sockeye and coho are headed to the Northern District. On page 15 of PC 138 is a quote by NOAA from the Federal Register that stocks returning to freshwater systems farther north in Cook Inlet tend to stay close to the middle of the inlet when they move through the EEZ. The NMFS will likely, as I said, allow fishing twice a week until August 15th or until a total allowable catch is reached. These TACs are set by species, not by stock. No one knows how many salmon of any species have been caught in state versus federal waters, yet the National Marine Fisheries Service has had to make estimates of historical catches in the EEZ to develop a pre-season forecast as a basis for harvest. As of 2 weeks ago, at the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council meetings, a TAC harvest ranges that were suggested by NMFS for sockeye salmon, they range from 1.3 million to 440,000 to be caught in the EEZ, depending on what committee or the council was deliberating. And the coho range from 39,000 to 25,000 fish. We have no idea where in this range they will land, but they must make a decision by May 1st. Vessels will be able to fish federal and state waters, but not in the same day. They'll each require different permits. National Marine Fisheries has no tools to determine run size or abundance of specific stocks. They have essentially no in-season management tools, only a pre-season forecast and a TAC by species. The conservation corridor was created by this board in 2011, and NMFS appears to be on track to eliminate the benefits of the corridor that have been brought for the Northern District sockeye and may make it more difficult for northern coho to return in abundance. As a result of these concerns, our commission recommends that the board limit all drift gill net fishing in state waters to the terminal harvest zones, that you reject any expansion of the drift gill net fishery in state managed waters, and consider a super exclusive management system for waters managed by the state. Thank you.
Please, for the record, define what you believe to be a super exclusive.
Thank you, Chair Wood. In a super exclusive zone, once you register there, you cannot fish another area. So it's been used by the state in the Togiak herring fishery. It's been used by the federal government in Norton Sound king crab fishery. To my knowledge, it has never been used to distinguish between a state and a federal fishery. But I think the suggestions that we're putting out here are kind of this, we're giving options for the bingo card. You know, we're trying to protect these weak stocks just like you're trying to protect the late run king salmon in Kenai. And there's different management options we're trying to suggest and then kind of get creative around that and define what that means.
And I'm hoping that your organization comes forward with a bingo card layout. It would be most appreciated by some of us at the board. Thank you. Any other questions from any other board member? Thank you, Kendra. Next up is Gabe Kidder.
Kendra was nice enough to leave the mic on for me. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, my name is Gabe Kidder. You can refer to my testimony in RC 46. I currently serve as a member of the Mat-Su Fish and Wildlife Commission. My testimony today will lay out the value of the Mat-Su Basin and habitat it has to offer the Cook Inlet fishery as a whole if fish are able to successfully migrate through the Northern District. I would like to refer to PC 138, and you will see that the majority of my testimony can be found from pages 21 through 24. As you turn to those pages in the Mat-Su booklet of It Takes Fish to Make Fish, I would like you to start with the map on page 22. This map clearly lays out the minute area currently developed in red in comparison to the remainder of available and viable habitat amongst 4,000 miles of tributary streams documented in the Anadromous Waters Catalog. The Susitna Basin is approximately 20,600 square miles, and at the heart of the Susitna Basin is, of course, the Susitna River. From source to salt, the Susitna River is about 320 miles. This is home to everything from sport fishing opportunities at the mouth of Fish Creek, the popular resident and guided sport fish opportunities of the Deshka, to the subsistence fish wheels near Squentna. This is not to mention the other habitat aside from the Susitna River, like the Little Susitna, Jim Creek, Goose Creek, Cottonwood Creek, and Big Lakes Fish Creek, to name a few, all of which are surrounded by viable and healthy habitat. These systems are home to a multitude of opportunity for all users, both residents to fill their freezers and non-residents to boost our local economy. The Susitna River supports Alaska's 4th largest population and 2nd largest recreational king fishery. The Susitna River is the 3rd largest sockeye producer in Upper Cook Inlet and could be a large contributor for coho as well. All of this area with good habitat is for nothing if not adequately provided with salmon. Think of the Susitna Basin as a large portion of our field that has the potential and history to grow an abundant and sustainable crop. The land is there, the water is there, now it's time to seed the field. With massive amounts of habitat in the Susitna Basin, the passage of more fish north would improve the productivity of Susitna salmon, providing harvest opportunity for all users, from commercial users in the lowest reaches of Cook Inlet to the subsistence fish wheels in Squentna. All of this said, this land filled with fish habitat is here for salmon to utilize and for all of us to benefit from. We just have to allow the fish to get there and let them do the work. Thank you, everyone, for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any questions from any board member? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next person up, Jen Sykes. Anytime you're ready, Jim.
Good morning, Chairman Wood and members of the board. My name is Jim Sykes, member of the Mat-Su Fish and Wildlife Commission, and a personal use dip netter. I used to fish the mouth of the Kasilof, but I can now dip net on the lower Susitna and Fish Creek since the conservation corridor was implemented. The conservation corridor, as you've heard, allows more salmon to get to their northern natal rivers. It's been effective, and it needs to continue and be improved. The reason our commission strongly believes it's essential is also more sensible and economical to protect salmon habitat and salmon populations instead of suffering the long and expensive process of restoring them. While conservation corridor seems to be working, we are worried about new declines in coho runs that have historically been healthy. We can't afford to have the cohos follow the king declines. The borough's worked hard to maintain salmon habitat within our 4,000 plus miles of Anadromous rivers and streams, and it continues to expand its extensive network of fish passage improvements that have reopened over 1,000 miles of stream miles and more than 6,000 acres of lake habitat for salmon rearing, spawning, and fishing. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has recognized the borough and many of its partners for doing it right with several national awards. The investment by local partners totals over $20 million, and the borough's robust culvert replacement program is ongoing as a fisheries priority. The borough's wetland management plan is also borough-wide, and all U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wetland permits are reviewed for possible comment. In addition, the native village of Eklutna with the Great Land Trust conserved thousands of acres of land for hunting, fishing, foraging, including the wetlands of the mouth of the Knik River. Knik Tribal Council and Chickalin Native Village have contributed to habitat restoration throughout the region. Other local bank protection programs, pollution cleanup, and important vegetation stream buffers have also been successful. The Commission continues its efforts to protect water body setbacks with all who are concerned about the local salmon streams. We've had some pike infestation problems, which is why the Commission is supporting a number of proposals that will liberalize northern pike harvests, along with continued research and dedicated funding to eradicate pike from salmon spawning in rearing areas. I personally look forward to the day we can have a huge pike fishing contest, a derby, with a celebrity chef cook-off, and a strategy to make pike available for people needing food. Support for salmon habitat is strong, and we need to ensure the salmon destined for our northern Cook Inlet rivers have a good opportunity to reach the rich habitat that awaits their concern. And I'll answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions from any board members? Thanks very much.
Thank you all very much.
Mac Menard.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Mac Menard, for the record, working for the Mat-Su Borough. My job was supposed to wrap this up. You've just heard from 8 people who represent hundreds of years of experience, both professionally and on the ground, and there's nothing I can wrap up. These guys told you the value of the conservation corridor. They elevated their concerns over the impacts of the EEZ. They raised the issue of mixed stock fisheries management. They pointed out decades of priority being placed on Kenai sockeye in fear of some lost yield, while at the same time being the very residents that shouldered the burden of those decisions and lost yield in their area. And the conservation corridor, terminal stock fisheries management, those are your pathways forward to ensure that that gets reversed. That we have historically turned the corner. We know from prior discussions at Kenai, we haven't seen an escapement yet that hasn't replaced itself. The fear that we're going to overdo it hasn't evolved. So look at these folks, and you know, as we move forward, the threat of the EEZ among the discussions within this group can't be overstated. This is a very serious consequence. There's going to be some discussion of tools that could possibly be put in place so that we can manage that. But certainly, you can't forget the words of Bill Egan during his inaugural address. On the ruin of this once great resource, we shall rebuild. And that's what brought state management to fisheries in Alaska. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close.
And the discussions you're referencing are going to be in committee of the whole, I presume?
Yes, sir. We're prepared to bring those forward in the committee of the whole.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions from any board members? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your organizational efforts with the commission.
It was a pleasure.
We're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll